evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Gabriel Van Oust. I am the President and CEO of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, and welcome to this exclusive preview of a first-time collaboration between NJSO and Trilogy, an opera company, in selections from Michael Raphael's Emmett Till. We'll hear from community leaders and enjoy the powerful musical performances from a world-class opera company and the strings of the NJSO. Please be aware that our presentation this evening includes historical images that are graphic in nature. When Emmett Till was murdered, his mother insisted on an open casket, and the presentation this evening reflects that desire. As we go through the evening and we hear from our wonderful panelists, feel free to ask questions. For those who are familiar with Zoom, if you use the Q&A function, we'll be tracking questions and be able to answer them from our panel. And now, please join me in welcoming Trilogy Artistic Director Kevin Maynor, who will hear first as he sings O Son of Man. Welcome, Kevin. I'm going to invite you and our panelists to put their video on and unmute.
Hello, Gabriel.
Hey, Kevin. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for having us here. I think so fondly of the person who actually got us all together. And I hope he is listening tonight from the Newark Arts Council, Jeremy Johnson. He brought us together, did he not, Gabriel?
He definitely did. And I think I see him in our audience here tonight. Hey, Jeremy. It's good to see you even digitally.
Very good, very good. I want to take this time to introduce our panel to everybody. This piece, Emmett Till, is very important to me, very important to Trilogy, because it is sort of the starting point, maybe, for, I would imagine, this current group of people that are running things here in the United States of America. This is about as far back as they can sort of remember. And so Emmett Till gives us a great launching pad and helps us understand some of the social unrest that's going on in the world. But let me first introduce the panel. I am your host, Kevin Maynor, and I am the artistic director of Trilogy and Opera Company. And I am an opera singer, and I have sung all over the world. Our first panelist that we have with us this evening is Dr. Timothy Levi Atkins Jones, who is my pastor and the senior pastor of Bethany Baptist Church in the city of Newark, New Jersey. Then we have with us Ms. Candace Wildey, who's a retired director of human resources in East Orange, Newark, and Millburn Public Schools. Now that's a lot. Then we also have Ms. Dolores Tyson, who's the former president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan New Jersey. And then we follow with Mr. Keith Harvest, who's a municipal judge in the township of Irvington, and he's the former chief assistant prosecutor in Essex County. Then we have France Massey, who is the assistant deputy public defender in the state of New Jersey. And then we have, of course, the Reverend Douglas Williams, a senior pastor of Zion Hill Baptist Church. And we follow him with Gabriel Van Alst, who's the president and CEO of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. Welcome to you all.
Welcome. Good to be here. Good to be here.
Good evening.
I chose all of you because I think you all are very important in our community in one way or another. Some of you I've had more experiences with than others, but I know I've been here for some time now, and I know what the old guard looks like, and I know what they are capable of doing, and they're capable of doing quite a bit. But I think it's good for a great organization like the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra to see who the new players are, to see what's going on. They're quite bright, quite brilliant, and quite capable. And I think it's important for people around the world to see what's happening in Newark, New Jersey. And I'm going to sort of start this thing off because I know Gabriel is going to probably have to cut me off at a certain time. So I want to get right to it. Let me start out here saying, first of all, the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra is absolutely marvelous, are they not? And
yes, indeed.
Wonderful. Playing this piece by the wonderful composer Michael Raphael, who happens to be Black. And this important piece that we did some years back. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but I'm going to say now, Dr. Jones, I need to know what needs to happen for your members to continue to support the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. What does Trilogy have to do to be relevant in your church? Now I'm going to keep going. Candace Wildey, as a past human resources person, what needs must the country's orchestras meet to be important to the financially minded, progressive Black community? Dolores Tyson, you've seen it all. I don't think you're on here yet, so I might have to speak on your behalf. You've seen it all with regards to our children and the families from which they have come. You've seen all kinds of programs, but what kinds of programs actually do we need to be doing to support our families? What can our orchestras and our opera companies, our chamber orchestras be doing, our dance companies, what can they be doing? Judge Harvest, much comes across your bench. Change, I know. How can the serious music producers help? How can they help you, my brother? France Massey, you are an attorney for the people who loves music and a real thinker and giver. If the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra was looking for help, what can they do with regards to hiring and programming? Reverend Williams, what do you plan to tell your congregation about what you have heard here today? And Gabriel, you have Asians, Latinos, and whites who are getting very old in our community, on top of a predominantly Black community that does not support your organization for one reason or another. What will you continue, shall I say? Will you continue, because you're already doing it, obviously. Will you continue to collaborate? And then I myself, I'm going to talk about what I really feel Black organizations and in this nation must do and help in terms of helping to choose the kind of repertoire and that we must be listening to and that we must develop our families with. So I'm going to go right straight to Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Brother Maynor, and certainly to everyone else on the panel. It's a joy to be here this evening, and certainly a joy to experience and to enjoy. I've had the pleasure, since I've been in Newark almost 5 years now, of being with the symphony on numerous occasions. And I must say, I think I said this to church not too long ago, that before coming to Newark, journeying down to the symphony was not something that was going to be a part of my regular repertoire. But Bethany is a church that has always had such a deep appreciation for the arts and connections to New Jersey Symphony Orchestra and to NJPAC as well, that I had to go and get acclimated. And then once I was introduced to the beauty of our symphony orchestra here in New Jersey, it was hard to stay away. And so in terms of maintaining our connection, I have no doubt that at Bethany, that won't be a problem. And so there are continued and sort of deep connections. But I think to reach a broader audience, it's about access. And indeed, you asked a question about being relevant, but I think it's about access and about choosing pieces that speak to the life experiences. One of the things I love about Trilogy, and I'm gonna come back to Trilogy, is that it seems like every piece, or at least every other piece, is if it's not a beautiful German symphony, it is a symphony that's speaking directly to issues and needs and culture. The fact that there is an Emmett Till symphony at all, I think piques certainly my interest and the interest of those there. I think it's an unfounded one, but I think many would say that there's a kind of disconnect between symphony and orchestral music and Black culture. And while that's not an accurate distinction, I think people would understand it. And so if there is an understood gulf, if you present cultural touchstones that allow folk to see themselves and to understand themselves in not just the music, but also in the production of the music, the themes and the cultures of the music, I think that goes a long way towards pulling people in. And then Trilogy, obviously, with your long and deep connection to Bethany, I don't think that'll be an issue as well. But it's really the same thing about access and awareness, and again, about those cultural touchstones that make it more than simply a symphony, more than simply beautiful music, but something they believe that speak to our very souls. And so I think that will continue to be the case.
Well, now you see why he's my pastor.
Bless you, man.
Yes, indeed. I think so much about, there's a Jewish woman who's a good friend of mine, Luna Kaufman. And she used to say to me all the time, she used to say, Kevin, why on earth should Black people go and hear Madame Butterfly when they could hear actually Treemonisha or Frederick Douglass? What's wrong with you, Kevin? Why aren't you presenting those types of things? This is what she said to me. And I said, you're right, Luna. You are absolutely correct. I'm going to move right on now quickly to Candace Wildy. Now, Candace, as a part of the human resources, as a past human resources person, what needs must the country's orchestras meet to be important to the financially minded, progressive Black community?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and be part of this panel. I think Reverend Dr. Atkins Jones summarized it perfectly. A lot of it has to do with relevance. And in these economically strapped times, families always have to make choices among competing priorities. The arts have to remain relevant. And I think that by continuing with collaborations such as this one tonight, where you take a very important event, it was only a singular event, and it was one of many, many events of this nature. But we tell this story and we pair the beautifully written and beautifully performed music with the relevant story that connects not only to our history, but also with what's happening today. But there's also another side of it. And you pointed out, Kevin, in your question that Gabriel will address later on, how do we actually increase the number of people of color in our orchestras? We have our musicians playing, but we have our singers and we have our composers. And oftentimes we don't see a real diversity in terms of the musicians actually playing the music. Well, why is that? Well, I've had the privilege of working in communities across a broad spectrum. I've worked in underserved communities, large school districts, in which they may or may not have had schools of fine and performing arts. When they have those kinds of schools, they can address the musically talented youngsters in those schools. But if a youngster goes to a comprehensive high school, they may not get that specific training. And oftentimes it's up to the parents to supplement whatever training they got in the school system with private lessons. Again, if you're talking about competing priorities, parents don't often have the funds to continue private lessons. Now, in the communities of need that I've worked, you don't often find a lot of private lessons taking place. A child may be lucky enough to get in a performing arts high school, or may go to a school like the Newark Boys Chorus. But it's in our more affluent communities where children are actually programmed into taking the music lessons, the voice lessons, the ballet lessons, and all of those other things that support the arts. So what do our orchestras have to do? You have to continue your artist in residency programs in our schools. You have to continue offering Saturday programs. You have to consider offering summer programs. You have to continue giving out scholarships so that we can attract, train, and keep our youngsters from those communities involved in the arts. And as you see more and more performers of color in our symphonies, you will see a wider and more diverse audience being attracted.
Thank you, Candace. She's on our board, Trilogy's board, and she's brilliant, as you can see. Here. I'm so sorry that Dolores Tyson cannot be on, because she was the past president of Planned Parenthood. And boy, she has a lot to say. Dolores is a very good friend, and we talk often, very late at night, 12, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. We're on the phone talking about what's happened for our children in this community. Now, Dolores is let's put it like this. She's a supporter of the Metropolitan Opera. She's a supporter of NJPAC, and she's a supporter of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. She gives her money. And if you don't believe it, just go outside the building of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and you'll see her bricks all out there with her name on them. But she's a longtime participant and a longtime giver. And I don't know a politician in this town that doesn't respect her. But I have to say, one of the things that Dolores is always concerned with is the development of families. She does not believe in the isolation of the child. Oftentimes, what will happen in our communities is that people from the outside, if you will come and take our children, and then they will enhance and develop them. They will do nothing with the parents because they feel the parents might be combative or might be difficult to deal with, or might question what it is that they're doing, or they might suppose something that they don't want to really hear or be accustomed to or get accustomed to. But Dolores is constantly saying, until we actually develop the entire family, we cannot just develop the children by themselves, because the children can't get to the concerts. Somebody in the family has to bring them to the concerts. And then somebody has to wait at 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the evening and bring them home. Someone has to prepare the meals for them the next day so that they can get to school on time. Someone has to take care of them. And Dolores is big on the family. She knows oftentimes children will come home from concerts and be all enthused and ready to talk about it. And who can they talk to? Who can in their family can they talk to about this music that they've heard? Well, sometimes no one. So the development of the family is a big thing with Dolores. And I'm going to be asking Kristen if she will put together something for me now with regards to Open the Coffin. I think so often about the music that we have actually chose here and that Michael put together. Michael calls upon the situation as it is. Mamie Till, she looked at what had happened to her son, and they had taken advantage of him. And she wanted the world to see what they actually had done to them, done to him. And also, she wanted the people that had done this to see, and their families to see, because she wanted their families to be moved by what was done to her son. And I think the first time that we did this piece, Open the Coffin and See What They've Done to My Child, the audience, I remember, they just gasped. I was so surprised that so many people had never seen these pictures. Well, I'm here to tell you, they are horrible pictures to see. And they remind me of my friend, Vincent, who committed suicide years ago, and jumped in the water and his body was bloated. But they did some horrible things to Emmett Till. They cut off his testes and stuffed them in his mouth, and they drug him on the back of a truck, and then they drowned him. And they did all of this, because he actually whistled at a white woman. Yes, every time I hear that, it brings tears to my eyes because it has a very special meaning for me. Um, I if I may, before you play the next piece, Kristen, if I may, before you play the next piece, I would like to talk and hear from Judge Harvest. So many things comes across his bench, and I know he's looking for a certain kind of change, and when I've got to get some child out of jail, that's who I go see. And, he helps me. Judge Harvest is the tour de force in our community. And how can the serious music producers help, Judge? How can?
Go ahead. Let me start by saying that I'm honored to be here. I got involved, or I should say, I found out about Trilogy this because I went to see the opera Emmett Till when you performed it at Science High. And I was just in the background, I was in the audience. I didn't make my presence known, but I was inspired since that time with Trilogy and what they were doing in the community. Because here's the problem. A lot of youth come across my desk. I was a prosecutor before I was a judge. And it's what I call stolen and wasted talent. You got a lot of talented individuals who have crossroads. These young people have crossroads. And some of them go to the right, some of them go to the left. And there's consequences with the direction that you take. Now, when I was young, you had music programs in school. Right now, politically, when the budget gets low on Board of Educations in cities, what's one of the first things to go? Music programs. Now, showing my age, when I was growing up, you had Saturday sessions. I grew up in the city of Orange. Every room was full of lessons. You had lessons in different musicians. You had strings, you had brass, you had woodwinds. When you walked through the halls, you just heard music wafting through the hallways while you were going to your lessons. I took lessons every Saturday. Look forward to it. Okay, you don't have that anymore. This is what you need. This creates not only a dedication to music, it creates a passion in young people. Okay, I was fortunate enough to perform, and I used to perform on a local high school. We had this little band, and 2 or 3 people that I performed with have played professionally, because they had that core, they had that balance in the beginning. Gabriel, you might not remember this individual. Well, I'm going back in the history books, but Henry Lewis used to be the conductor of New Jersey Symphony. He lived in Orange. He used to bring the symphony to the high school and do performance every year. And you can see, that was a long, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna say my age, but that was a long time ago. But you see, that still resonates with me because it was music. He exposed people to the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. And I'll go so far as back as also say that when I was a prosecutor, we had a summer program for youth. And we used to come and do a tour at the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra with our high school students also. We tried to expose them because culture is the footprint of music is a footprint of a culture. It shows the society. When you start digging up artifacts, you see the art, the music that define what a society is like. You cannot have a complete society without music, without art, okay? And like I said, I see these kids, I see some of them have talent. They have talents in leaps and bounds, but they don't have an avenue to exercise that talent in a safe and wholesome environment. And I think that's what we need. We need outreach.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. I'm sitting here thinking to myself about years ago, not that many years ago, but I remember when Reverend Watley was at St. James AME Church. James Scott was at Bethany Baptist Church, and David Jefferson was at Metropolitan Baptist Church, and they were trying to figure out how to get the symphony orchestra into the church. And boy, they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they could find out a way to get it to Bethany and a way to the Metropolitan because of the way it was set up. But they couldn't figure out what to do in terms of getting the orchestra into St. James, AME. Well, luckily I was there on the committee. It was called the Outreach Committee. And I was on this committee, and I couldn't figure why they chose me to be on the committee when all these great artists were in the town itself, Amiri Baraka and all these people, and they were not there. I later figured out why, some of them were upset with Baraka. They were calling him the angry little man. But he had a lot to say. But needless to go any further in that direction, but importantly so, they were trying to figure out what to do at St. James AME. So I said to them simply, I said, you have enough space there to do the Shostakovich symphonies, the 14 or the 17. Just they're smaller, and you can do them there, and they mean something, or the Baba Yar. And you can draw a correlation between what happened with the Russians and what happened with Black people. I said, you can make it so that it's clear what this kind of suffering is all about. I think something, when I looked at what is actually going on now with all of the different Breonna Taylor and so forth, and police officers placing their knees on people's necks and so forth. And then people say, well, where did that come from? Well, there are elder people in these homes, grandparents and great-grandparents that remember what happened to Emmett Till. And here it is still going on. And so how in the world can you expect someone to come and to hear Beethoven or Vivaldi and whatnot when it draws no real correlations in terms of what is going on in their lives? Now we'll get to all of that, but I want Kristen to play something else. I think, Come See My Child, Come and See for Yourself. The first person to open the coffin was really what I think Mamie Till wanted the white people to see what they had done to her son. And then later, as she comes to Chicago, she wanted people to come and see what they had done to her child. And Michael Raphael sets this very quickly, straight to the point. And Kristen, if you will, please. Such a cruel happening, but such a beautiful rendition that's given to us. I think it's so important to understand that sometimes we have to put the ugly with the beautiful. I think it's very important sometimes to put the ugly with the beautiful. You hear this beautiful music being played with all of these wonderful string instruments, and then this beautiful voice going up above it and repeating a text that's straight to the point. But is something that we must consider. It calls on us to consider, to imagine, what this must have been like. And I love the photographs that have been placed by Dan Graziano so that we can see what was going on during that time. And you can look at those huge amounts and groupings of people, trying to figure this all out and sort of fed up with what's going on in Mississippi. I think it's also very important right now for me to introduce to you Mr. Franz Massé. Franz is an attorney, and he's a attorney for the people, if you will, and he loves music, and he's a real thinker and a giver. And Franz, I really want to know if the NJSO is looking for help, what can they do with regards to hiring and programming? Where is their place?
Thank you, Kevin, for this opportunity, and thank you, NJSO, for creating this platform. It's important to pause for a moment and just contemplate what we just saw. Just the anguish in those pictures. Yes, it is juxtaposed with the beauty of the music and the strings and the voices, but just the anguish that is captured for all times in that moment. It delves into messaging. It delves into messaging because if we think about 1955, there had been multiple opportunities for the world to become aware of what was happening in America. And this snapshot in August of 55 allowed the world to see what exactly the African-American experience was about. And it created the cataclysm by which the Montgomery boycott happened a few months later. A lot of the civil rights progress that we think about, that's what happened. And I think it's similar to what happened with George Floyd. What happened to George Floyd was not uncommon. It was not something that was new, but it created an opportunity and it galvanized the world to see such an atrocity. And I think that that is the beginning of a movement. And it's very encouraging to see that NJSO has partnered up with Trilogy to showcase some of these things that are so relevant to the Black community. So we deal with programming. How does NJSO, which is a venerable institution, how does it stay current with the beat of the street? How does it deal with creating programming, which it has always provided, but of a traditional classic nature? How does it stay relevant? And I think part of that relevancy comes from the medium by which it provides the programming. It has forced many art organizations to rethink programming, because programming for a long time, as our chair has always said, is butts in the seat. That's what programming has been for the longest time. But now we can't go to the opera house. We can't go to the symphony. So NJSO, to its credit, has Instagram and those type of mediums to allow you to bring in a new crop of listeners. I think of the same thing with Classic FM. It has a podcast. All of those mediums are ways by which NJSO can put itself and engage the youth of the community. One of the things that I remember recently being confronted with is if you're under 35, you probably don't have a Facebook page. Whereas right now I'm above 35, so I think Facebook is king, but Instagram is king if you're under 35. So I'm encouraged that NJSO has that, and I would continue to encourage them to find those young people who are both engaged in the music and the platform that you serve, and who's also able to provide you that social media avenue so that you are able to continue to provide the excellent programs you have done today.
Thank you, Franz. Yes, this is the challenge, is finding your way through and having the energy and fortitude to do that, and to take time to reach who it is you must reach. And while we're reaching that younger group, I don't want to leave out their parents and their grandparents at the same time, because I know oftentimes we get dollars from dealing with children, and which is fine. And my children benefited from a comprehensive, all-inclusive type of education. They went to the finest schools that they had around here, and they were in New York at the Dance Theater of Harlem, at the Harlem School of the Arts, here in Newark at the Newark School of the Arts. And they went to different private schools and all kinds of things, and they studied all kinds of instruments. My daughter alone, she played the clarinet, the oboe, the piano, and she was a ballet dancer. My son played the violin and the drums, this type of thing. So, but not all children have those kinds of experiences. And we push for those kinds of things. And Franz is right. We have to make way so that our children can have these experiences. And we have to make the parents understand that it's important for them to have those kinds of experiences, so they make the right choices. And not just Black children, white children too. When we look at and we see what makes a man put his knee on someone's neck? What makes a man drag someone through the mud, cut off all their testes and so forth, and then beat them and drown them, a boy? And there must not be much beauty inside. And this is the quest, to give that, to present that, and then to get those people, as Franz says, he's talking about our Vice President, Roxanne Fontaine, who always says, we've got to get butts in the seats. That's her saying, and he's right. And it's important that we do just that. I want to move on to Reverend Williams. And Reverend Williams is a magnificent preacher that Dr. Jones brought to us when we were having our deaconess day and trustee day at the church, which is a celebration, coronation, if you will, of the officers, of new officers in the church, particularly in the Baptist church. Reverend Williams is a great orator, someone in Newark that we should be listening to and hearing from. Reverend Williams, are you on there? Can you speak?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm having some trouble starting my video, but I believe you all can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, beautiful. Well, what I witnessed tonight was absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. And in a day when it seems as if history is repeating itself, it is vitally important that we continue to share the story of the past with this generation. This generation may not be familiar with Emmett Till. However, they are familiar with the stories of Breonna Taylor and Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and Jordan Davis and Philando Castile. And it's just even pitiful that I can rattle off some more names off the top of my head. But however, I want my congregation, especially our younger members, to be exposed to such powerful and authentic work. I think that exposure is the key. The arts are very important, and they should be supported and upheld by our various faith communities, but especially the Black church. And I think relevant presentations such as what I experienced tonight for the first time has the ability to not only to motivate, but to educate a new generation and whet their appetite for the fine arts. I would also like to encourage not only my congregation, but other African-American houses of worship and faith communities to sponsor their young members who may show some sort of interest in the arts and to help to develop their talent. Our church has a long-standing history with the orchestra. We even have some young men who are currently enrolled at the North Boys Chorus School. And I would even love to bring the symphony to our church sometime in the near future to expose some of our other young people who may not have even been exposed to the arts, you know, to show them that this is relevant and it's something that they really should consider. I've literally been deeply moved tonight by what I experienced. And thank you for thinking of me and inviting me to be a part of such a very important panel.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Williams. And you're right, exposure is the name of the game. You know, I learned from the Rockefellers years ago as an opera singer. I would come into contact with them. And I remember they used to come to my performances, you know, if I would be doing something in at Lincoln Center. And they would come as sort of looking like bag people. They would be dressed up poorly and so forth. And we would wait, and somebody would say, "Who are those bag people?" And they were the Rockefellers, but they didn't want everybody to know that they were there. But they were not going to the top schools and so forth, but they were exposing themselves to the arts and to all different kinds of beauty. And they were having education by way of exposure, and not so much the formality and the organization of learning in that regard,
Absolutely.
but by exposure. And exposure is the name of the game. And so, and my challenge, you know, before I turn to Gabriel to ask him some questions, is that we must know the repertoire. And if we are going to work in the various communities, we must know that the Latino community would be interested in Condor, which is a great opera done in South America, and that Black communities, you know, they want to hear Robeson, by Adolphus Hale Stork, and of course Emmett Till by Michael Raphael, and Ulysses K's Frederick Douglass, and this type of thing, this kind of repertoire that's available to us all, and that we can, you know, actually bring forth. And but I'm looking at Gabriel now. Gabriel, you have Asians, you have Latinos, and you have whites who are very, very old now and have supported our communities for years at the symphony, on top of a predominantly Black community that does not support your organization for one reason or another. Will you still continue to collaborate? I mean, there are some, of course, that support the symphony. Will you continue to figure out what to do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think what's interesting about the panel tonight is, you know, hearing a lot of similar words. Relevance is a word that came up a lot from our various panel members. You know, listening to the community is something. But before I jump into that and answer your question, I do want to throw out, as the person who is in charge of the symphony, I do want to acknowledge the incredible singers this evening. We haven't given them kudos. So I'm going to come back to your question in a second. Obviously, Kevin, bravo, Chantel Grant, and we have three amazing young boys from the Newark Boys Chorus, and all playing Emmett, and you know, they all did an incredible job this evening. So I just want to throw out to them. But back to your question for a second about, you know, the makeup of the orchestra and our audiences. You know, this is something that we have been thinking about for a long time, and it's really telling to me that we heard about Henry Lewis. Now, Henry Lewis, for those who know, was one of the first African-American music directors in the country. And, you know, we're very proud of him that he was at the NJSO, but we have relied on that history too much. And we have to take the lessons that we learned from that and bring them into play now. And what that means to me is representation on stage and relevance. And whether that is through the composers that we're programming, the artists that we're programming, the collaborations that we're entering into, it's really, really important for us to reflect the communities that we serve and understand that the communities that we serve are ever changing. And you're right, we are a predominantly, you know, white Asian institution in a largely African American city. And we have an obligation to reflect all of New Jersey society, not just the societies that have traditionally been associated with classical music. And, you know, change takes effort, change takes a giving up control. And, you know, we all love Beethoven, Bruch, and Brahms, and any other, you know, dead white European men, but there is plenty of excellence to be had from different voices. And I think we're seeing that here tonight. And, you know, we have a wonderful music director, Shen Zhang, who is incredibly committed to programming and presenting diverse voices all across our offerings, whether it's in this COVID world, where we're operating in a digital space, or whether it's back on the main stage whenever that's possible. Now, we have a long journey in front of us. And, you know, I've talked a little bit about the programming of guest artists, but there's also, you know, the orchestra on stage, as well as the makeup of the staff and the makeup of our board. And we hear consistently from, you know, leaders in promoting diversity amongst organizations that to change an organization is about changing, a big part of changing an organization to become more diverse and representative is about changing the voices in the room, making the decisions. And we are very committed to that. But, you know, all that's to say is these are very, you know, we have a long journey in front of us. It would be, we need to be humble in our journey. We need to listen to the community's needs and be presenting programs like today that are relevant to them. Now, I would hope that, you know, a trap that you can fall into, one can fall into is only, especially with the Black experience, only representing a Black experience of tragedy. And, you know, tonight's opera presentation is a tragic experience, but we also have to celebrate the full gamut of emotions and the full gamut of experience to be relevant. So, you know, the NJSO is committed to that. We're committed to change. We are committed to learning and being reflexive. And, you know, I think this is probably, I don't even know if today is step one of that journey. It's probably step 0.1. We have a long way to go. And, you know, the entire classical music industry is grappling with this. Obviously, over the summer, as we've talked about already, there's been so much spotlight on inequity in this country and the world, and we can do our part. And, you know, that's as broad as programming or youth education work, which we're very proud of, but we need to do more and we need to listen more. So I hope that answers the question.
Not to put you in that kind of situation, you know, on the hot seat, but I'm sure you don't mind because
No, we actually have two questions from the chat that I think it's probably worth asking. We're a little over time, but given that most of our attendees are still here, I think we should sit down. So if you don't mind, Kevin, I'll read the questions from the chat. So the first one's actually for you. It's that your aria at the beginning was such a powerful aria. How does that affect you as a singer emotionally?
Well, you know, people in my family say I'm a crybaby. I am. I'm always accusing everybody else of crying. But when I'm performing, I try not to cry. It's not a good thing to do. But I do allow my emotions to come and to be a part of the experience. And I have learned, because of my technique, I like to think I have a very good technique, that when that happens, I can compensate and still do what is needed. And you probably saw me tearing up when I was listening to Chantel and the boys, because, you know, I know the nature of training a child to sing like that. These boys are trained at the Newark Boys Chorus, which is a very fine boys chorus. And I've sung with the greatest boys choruses in the world, all over the place. And I'm telling you, right here in Newark, Donald Morris is doing a tremendous job with those boys. I'm listening to the change in registration and so forth, and how they're moving and negotiating the balance of the voice, the mobility. These are technical terms that we use as a singer, but all of these things are right. And they move you when they're right. They move you when they are right, because that's what actually moves you in music. When it's excellent, you're right, Gabe, when it's excellent. I have no problem. Trilogy has no problem looking at repertoire that I think is important and developmental in our community. I have taken it in the ring. We've done the first ring in New Jersey. We've done it in German. And I've hired everybody to be in that ring because I felt it was important to do. And it was a beautiful encore of music that should be shared with the world. And it was very emotional for me, you know, because I knew not only did we achieve something, it was just pure gorgeous. I want our community to have the experience of having that kind of music around you and engulf you. And I'm going to take the time to tell you, I remember my first wife, when I first got married, we were in Scotland and we were I was doing Die Walküre. And I went to John Malchieri, who was the conductor at the time. And I said, I want you to let my wife sit in the middle of the orchestra when you do the ride. And he looked at me, you want me to let your wife sit in the middle of this orchestra when we do the ride of the Valkyries? I said, yes, she works for IBM. He said, oh, okay. And he put her in the middle of that. She heard that, she started crying and talking about it. She didn't miss any performances. We have to create these kinds of performances that just turn people inside out. And so if we can do an Emmett Till, which means something to a grandmother or grandfather, who can then take their children or their grandchildren to the symphony or to the opera because they are so motivated because of its relevancy, as you say, Gabe. That's an important endeavor. Now, watch out for me because I get to talking here. But one thing for sure that's very important, I want to say one thing. As Black organizations like Trilogy and Alvin Ailey and Dance Theater of Harlem, they must form themselves. And then they come to the table with the collaboration. Because, you know, I remember what Pat said to me, Patrick Chamberlain, he said, well, Kevin, what shall we do? I said, okay, we should do Emmett Till because the piece that we have is for all strings. I said, people will be safe because Trilogy believes in safe art. I said, there'll be strings and they can wear their masks. And wherever you gather them, they'll be able to perform. And so you have to plan for the time, you have to adapt. But it's very important that oftentimes we go to these Black organizations that are formulated and ask their opinions and find out what it is that we should be doing collectively, how to collaborate, completely. Gabe, go on, Gabe.
No, the second question is actually not a question so much as a statement from Mr. Jeremy Johnson, who brought us together, Kevin. So I'm going to read it out loud. I hope you don't mind, Jeremy. As a Newarker and as an African-American, I'm proud to be a supporter of both NJSO and Trilogy Opera. Thank you for bringing Emmett Till the opera to a broader audience. Kudos to Kevin and Gabe, the panelists, and the tremendous singers and musicians. More of this is needed to ignite our community, our youth, and excite audiences with relevant programming of our age. Let's do more together. And I think that absolutely that's true, Jeremy. We need to do more. And I think that that is something that's really important to everyone here on the panel. I probably should say that if there are any we talked a little bit about parents, and I didn't say this earlier, but if there are parents out there who are looking for music education opportunities for their kids, we have a fantastic youth orchestra program that goes from the first time you pick up an instrument all the way to going off to college, and great opportunities for any kids out there, either watching or parents out there as well. Unfortunately, we could speak all night. It is probably time for us to wrap this up. But I just wanted to say a personal and huge thank you to Kevin and all our distinguished panelists this evening. You've certainly given me a lot to think about. I'm sure you've given our audiences a lot to think about. This collaboration was really enriching for the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, and I don't think it will be our last. For those of you who are watching the panel, we do have one more piece of music that Kevin's going to introduce, but you'll be able to watch the complete performance video on the NJSO's YouTube and Facebook accounts. Please share it. We want as many people to see this as possible. This is a true collaboration born out of Newark, so we want it to be celebrated nation and worldwide. So with that, thank you to everyone. And Kevin, I'll throw over to you to introduce our last piece for the evening.
Yes, One Child. This next piece is very important because it actually sort of frames what actually happened during the time of the movement in the 50s there, moving into the 60s. So when I decided to do Emmett Till the second time, with Michael Raphael. The first time I did it with Charles Lloyd Jr., which our judge spoke of. But when I decided to do it the second time with a different composer, Barack Obama was running for the presidency. So I thought it was important to design something that showed how this whole thing happened. Emmett Till comes along, he's killed. Rosa Parks is moved by it, sits on the bus. They can't figure out what to do. A new preacher comes in town. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. They throw him in the mix. He leads the Montgomery bus boycott. He becomes hot, moves around, does some things with SCLC and all of these types of things. And then all of a sudden, you know, he runs into a guy named Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson, you know, says some things that Martin feels like maybe should happen somewhere else, maybe not down south. And Jesse goes up to Chicago. So then what happens after that, which is very interesting. While he is up there, then they decide that it's really time to organize a movement that is reflective of what is going on. And so they decide, you know, Jesse, all of a sudden, his children are watching over a guy named Barack Obama's children. He becomes and her daughter, Santita, becomes the godparents to Jesse Jackson's children. Jesse Jackson is watching Barack Obama. Next thing you know, Barack Obama is running for the presidency. And it's all starting from Emmett Till. And these are the kinds of things I think people should understand. I do want to say thank you to Reverend Dr. Jones, Candace Wildy, Dolores Tyson, Keith Harvest, Franz Massey, Reverend Douglas Williams, Gabriel Van Alst, Chantel Grant, Daniel Gunwa, David Gunwa, Cordell Tate Roberts in the Newark Boys Chorus, and their wonderful director, Donald Morris, and the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra Strings, and to Michael Raphael and his family. Thank you.